Okay, this is going to be a long form video, so I cut out my intro with my usual beautiful face. But as you can see, I've got all the pieces laid out to make the Ironweld Great Canon, and I'm going to do this in subassembly style. So what I've done is I have put together all of the parts and pieces that I think that I can, hold together and paint without too much of an issue. There are a lot of nooks and crannies on this thing, and what I like to do is sort of put it together, get all the parts and pieces, and lay out how I think I want it to be, where I want everything to sit, and I take all of the assembled pieces and I kind of just line them up a little bit. So that's sort of how it's going to be, right? Now, the scheme that I picked, it's a custom scheme, and again, I'm using my Monument Hobbies paints, Pro Acryl. And these paints are, I love them. They're excellent paints. They work the same across the range with very few exceptions, and 2 thin coats will do you. Now this is the first coat, as you can see, and like I said, I do 2 thin coats like I normally will do to make it as smooth as possible. And on this step, you're not really worried about making it accurate. You're just kind of worried about getting that initial paint down, and then we can worry about touching up any of the black pieces later. Now, I was initially going to make it purple and gold, but for whatever reason, I really like the combination of just normal black and purple. It makes it sort of look like a wrought iron type deal, and you know what? That tickles my fancy this time around. It also saves some steps. Once I've got my 2 thin coats down, and as you can see, I've kind of sped this up, I take some lighter purple, and this is just, the first color was royal purple, and this is this is just regular purple. And I am dry brushing it in all of those different areas that stand up and are raised in the corners of the windows and things like that, any sharp edges, and I'm just making sure to catch those with that lighter purple color. Now, this serves to make it kind of stand out a little bit, make it look weathered, and to me, this kind of looks like a darker version of purple heartwood, which is an actual thing if you look it up. Purple heart is an actual type of wood, and it does have a sort of violet hue to it. Nothing this bright and saturated as far as I'm aware, though. But you just take care to do all of those corner areas, and then you can touch up the black anytime you get some of this purple on the black areas. You can go back and just fix that. Now I'm showing you on a different shield here. This is the Marshall that's on the Ogre, and I'm taking that purple color and I'm actually just doing some of the divots and some of the gouges in the shield, some of the boards and some of the excess parts and pieces. I'm making sure to do the lower areas that would catch light. So any of those areas that catch light is where I'm worried about it showing up. And this is normal when you're doing dry brushing, when you're trying to edge highlight or dry brush. This is more edge highlighting, though. I'm kind of skipping around here, but it's the same way for all of my shields. They're all going to be that same purple on purple color, and I'm going to go back and do some of that lighter color, the regular purple color, on any of the edges of the boards and any of the lower areas. So the and the technique here, you want to tackle it from the side. You want to make sure you don't have a whole crap ton of paint on your brush. You don't want there to be a bunch on there, because then it'll go everywhere. So you kind of want to remove some of that paint from your brush and just graze the edges of those places with the side of the brush as best you can, as you can see me doing here. Now, doing the inner part of those boards, it's a little more tricky, and you kind of have to use the tip and brush that tip across the inner edge there, as you'll see me do on a couple of these smaller areas. I initially was going to do all of the boards and all of the inner edges, but I decided, you know what, that might be a little much to do, so I just kind of picked a couple of them just to kind of show some wear on some of the wood, but not all of it. And this is how it turned out. I'm actually quite happy with it. You can actually take it a bit further and even do like a very light dry brush of a lighter color. But I think that this is good enough because you have that darker royal purple on there, the darker royal purple in the recesses, and it's easy enough just to do your thing. Now, I picked, for some reason, I have an issue with purple and jade going together. I don't know why, and on the color wheel, it's not exactly, they're not exactly opposites to complement each other, but for whatever reason, I like the purple with that dark jade and jade. So what I've done here, and I left this part in to show you something else, so I'll show you that in a second here, but for whatever reason, the purple and the jade work really well for me. Now, here is where I make a mistake. And you see the shield kind of slips. And what I do really quickly is I get some water on my brush, and I just put a bunch of that water on the paint, and I brush it off. And you can see that paint, if you do it quick enough, the paint will just come right off. But you have to catch it quick. You can't let it sit. Plus some of that dark jade, even if some of the dark jade does kind of linger there, this is kind of like it's not really a glaze, but some of that paint, if it does dry there, it just looks like discoloration. Now, moving on to the black areas, this wrought iron, the best way to highlight that is with a darker gray color. Now, again, you could go with a light color on top of that and touch a couple of the areas, but in the end, I like just having the one dark gray color as the highlight because it does in the end look like wrought iron. Now, the wooden pieces, I had a bit of an issue with this because initially what I did is I used dark umber, and then I used light umber to dry brush, and I kind of felt like the recesses weren't dark enough, so I go back and fix that here in a second. But as you can see, that's me brushing on the dark umber, and then I use that light umber and I just dry brush over all of the raised areas, and all this does is just create some visual interest, and it gives you some of that light color on the edges, and that's how you kind of level it out. Now, this is, again, dark umber on top of light umber, and you got to be careful with this light umber because it is very light, but once it dries, it levels out a little bit, and that's where I came across the point where I was like, okay, this is kind of not dark enough in the recesses. But as you can see here, this is me just kind of taking my time and just picking out some of those raised areas and corners. And this is all standard dry brushing. You know, there's not much paint on here, and it's just me trying to get a little bit of lighter color on those corners and whatnot. And the corners are kind of the most important. This is the easiest way to sort of pseudo edge highlight everything, is just kind of dry brush it all, because this wood to me is supposed to look kind of worn, and whether this is a cannon, it's not a showpiece. They're actually going to take it out into the field and they're going to shoot somebody in the head with it, you know. So it's going to look worn, it's going to look weathered, it's going to look beaten down. And I'm not really paying much attention to these areas especially where the ropes are, because the ropes are going to be sort of a similar brownish color, and we'll get to those as well. But as you can see here, this is it's a fairly quick process. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to get a good dry brush down. So it's a pretty simple process. And as you can see where I had the putty on these. Now, after that, I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to take a wash, and I'm going to wash those recesses. And I realized, you know, that's going to take forever. So I decided to cut some corners, and I pulled out my Tamiya's panel liner. And I'm only using this in the deepest areas of the boards of where the decoration is at, just the places where you would be able to see a black color. And this panel liner, it's a very thin enamel paint, so you just kind of touch a corner of where you want it, and it sinks down into the recesses. And the surrounding areas, if they're too dark, all you got to do is just take a sponge and either some mineral spirits or even just a sponge on its own if you're quick enough, and just wipe that excess off. And I'm not doing it everywhere, I'm just kind of picking a couple of places. Now, as you can see here, I decided that I didn't like the wood grain here. It wasn't dark enough. So I decided to pull out my canister, my last bottle of Agrax Earthshade. Now, once I'm done with this, I'm going to go straight Monument Hobbies with most of my stuff here. I'm still going to use the occasional contrast paint, maybe the occasional Citadel paint, but for the most part, I have almost 100% swapped over to Monument Hobbies products. I just like them better. They work better for me. It's, not going to be the same for everybody. And, there's different paints for different scenarios. There's like heavy-bodied acrylics from Scale 75. I've got a couple of those too, but I really like Monument Hobbies products so far. Now, for these ropes, I used a mahogany color. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard to paint these on camera while you're trying to get a good picture, but also not get that mahogany color everywhere. And as you can see, it's a very dark, almost reddish brown. Now, what I decided here to do with this is I mixed some of that light umber with that mahogany. And initially, I was just kind of doing a little like a tap on each of the tops of the ropes. Then I realized, you know what? I can just kind of almost dry brush it on there. So I just kind of drug it across the top of the rope there just to get those raised areas and add a little bit of highlight on there. And that kind of makes it stand out a little bit more. I don't want it to look too much like the surrounding wood, which is why I went with that kind of reddish brown. And you can see the difference here. There is a difference between the color of the ropes and the color of the wood. Now, I did this, of course, as you can see, for all of the ropes. That's going to be the rope on the pull chain, and as you can see here, the ropes that are holding down the cannon on the the stoppers here. The whatever's holding it down to the ground. So all of that light umber with a little bit of that mahogany mixed in, all of that's going on the tops of each of these areas. Now, the next color we're going to pull out is a dark silver. Now, this is the Monument Hobbies equivalent of Lead Belcher, and I'm just doing the banding on here. I'm leaving the cannon part itself black. And I'm doing that for a reason. I like, again, this wrought iron look that I've got going on, and I'm going to try and preserve that across most of this stuff if I can. But that dark metal color is really nice. Dark silver. Now, as you can see, this is the preliminary of what it's going to look like. It's actually looking pretty good so far. A couple more details, and it will look great. And I am aware also that I'm missing one set of chains on the bottom. I had a hard time finding it, but in the end, it had dropped into that bottomless abyss of where all your parts and pieces go when you drop them on the ground on accident. But I did actually find it, and I attached it after the fact with a little bit of super glue. So again, this is me dry brushing that light umber. And for the anchors, I decided to break up the color scheme, and I decided to paint the anchors red. I don't know why, but there you go. Now for the basing, this is probably going to be the mud that I'm using is Vallejo. This is the light brown that you see me putting on now. I like the mud. I like this Vallejo mud. It's good. The stuff in the center is, I want to say it's rough ground. It's the one in the background. It's like an AK product. That's the last AK product I'm ever going to buy because I bought it from the hobby shop. I don't know what was going on with it, but it was dry when I opened it, and it looked like maybe someone had bought it, used it, and then took it back to the store, but I'm not sure. Anyway, you can see me here just kind of lining everything up. I'm putting down the models where I think they're going to need to go so I can carve, and you can see where I carved out the places where those models are going to be. And we're going to patch that up with some of this ground cover as well. Now, I'm here trying to use the last of my ebony flesh from Reaper, and that's the brown. And this this gray color is a dark neutral gray. Again, this is Monument Hobbies. So this is back to Pro Acryl. Now this dark neutral gray, I am using that on all of the stone features. I have a kind of a blown out brush here because with this texture paste, you got to kind of push it down into a couple of different areas, and you don't want to use your good brush for that. So I'm trying to get all of those white areas to make sure none of that white showing through. Now there are a couple of places I couldn't get even with the brush and the paint and thinning the paint. So to fix that, I decided to wash it all. So this is I can't remember if this one, because I do have a little bit of Nuln Oil left. I don't remember if that's Nuln Oil or if it's the Monument Hobbies stuff. And then this is my light umber going across that ebony flesh, just to make that mud, give that mud a little bit of difference. And that's just a really quick and dirty dry brush. And if there's any of that lighter brown that's still showing once you're done with this dry brushing, it doesn't matter. It all just shows up pretty well. So you just give that a quick light dry brush of that light brown, and it gives the mud a little bit more life to it. And it makes it look pretty good, honestly, in the end. Now this is a quick dry brush. You've seen me dry brush before. I shouldn't have to explain this too much. Dry brushing a little bit of a lighter gray on top of that, and then a kind of another lighter gray on top of that. And all this is Monument Hobbies stuff. These gray colors. This is all Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl. Now it's time to attach the cannon. Now I did leave some of that flock on the bottom, so I would know where to put the glue. And that's kind of a little trick that I use to see if it works. And it worked pretty good, because in the end, you're not going to see the very bottoms of these. But I put a little bit of that glue on each of these areas, just a little bit of super glue. And then you take it and drop it. And once you're done dropping it, then you have to, and forgive me for the focus here, but putting this thing together was kind of a pain in the butt. But I'm taking these models here and I'm putting them vaguely where they're going to go, just to make sure that nothing that's going to be on the ground is going to be in the way. So then you take that piece, that center piece, and stick it right there on the side. Now, obviously, you have to blend in the rock or the ground formation there that's on the bottom of the anchors. Now, I went into this, that's one thing I forgot to do, is I forgot to level out the areas where the anchors meet the flock. Okay, where it meets that, or the texture paste, excuse me. So, while I am painting it, you can see I'm pointing out here, there is a gap. So we're going to go back and we're going to fix that. No, that's not a problem. It's just as easy as putting a little more of that texture paste on there, and you can see it here, a little more of the texture paste, and then you paint the texture paste like the rock around it. Easy enough, not a big deal. And we're going to do the same thing, not only for that, but for the miniatures as well. So here's what it looks like once the cannon is down and the flock is down and everything has been kind of painted and normalized. That's what everything looks like. Now I'm going to take a little bit. This is a contrast paint. This is Skeleton Horde. This is one of my favorite bone/parchment colors. I do like still the contrast paints. They work really well, and I use them for stuff like that. So we're gonna just throw some of that contrast paint on there, and as you can see, a little bit got onto the wood, and I just take a little bit of water and I just wick that off, and that's easy enough. Now I was gonna put some words on the parchment, and I may go back and do that later, but for right now, I just kind of wanted it done. Now once I stick the rest of these down, you can see where I still have to fix that with a little bit of mud. So I'm taking a little bit of that same mud texture paste, and I'm just flopping it around the base there, the base of the miniatures where the feet are, and you go back and you paint that just like you would the rest of the mud. So here it is, easy peasy. I know this was a long form video, and I don't usually do these, but if you've liked what you've seen, like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video, everyone.